everybody, I'm Gary,
And I'm Carolyn.
and today we're going to talk about stigma and why it's so important. Well, stigma, first off, is the belief that people put you in a certain category right off the bat, based on appearances, look.
Maybe race or disability, something like that. Yeah.
And in the historic context in the 50s and 60s, people would send people with disabilities to institutions where they cannot contribute to society as a whole.
Wow. I think they'd also send individuals with mental health issues to institutions as well. And even orphans, a lot of times would be sent to institutions like orphanages. So it seems like if you didn't kind of fit the mold or have a family to belong to, then you were kind of sent away and had a negative stigma put on you.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. Well, I think that along with that, there's a lot of judgment that humans tend to have. And I think part of that we just inherit from our caveman ancestors, right? Like, you've got to be able to judge a situation and figure out if it's safe, if you're going to be able to catch the food, whatever. And so we kind of inherit those judgment skills in society where we're walking around, we want to make sure we're safe, we want to know who's around us. And unfortunately, we can use that judgment skill for negative purposes when we look at others and we judge them based on what they look like or a difference that we have with them. We make assumptions about who they are and what they can do based on what we see with our eyes before we even meet them or before we give them a chance. And along with that, I think we tend to have categories and labels that we put people into, right? Like, maybe their personal traits or maybe their physical attributes, maybe it's an illness or maybe it's someone's accent or things like that. We put a label on it and then it makes it easier for us to deal with the fact that they're different from us. And all of those things, making assumptions, labeling people and judging, create this stigma around disability and mental health that is very painful day to day for individuals to live their lives with.
Well, I think you bring up a good point there because in the day-to-day aspect, sometimes people with disabilities get treated as a child and not as their own individual, not as an individual. What I'm trying to say is their individual right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people will talk to the person or the guardian instead of the kid that's disabled, and that kind of puts a person that's disabled in a really weird or awkward spot.
Oh, for sure. And I think that awkwardness only gets bigger the older you get, right? Like, if you're 12 and someone talks to your parent instead of you, like, okay, it makes sense to some degree because parents make our decisions. But when you're 30 years old and you're out in public with a partner or a family member or a friend, and people talk to the partner, the family member, the friend instead of you, that gets super awkward. Like, why do we do that? And it happens all the time. I know it happens to us when we're out in public for sure. And a lot of times I'll just tell people, you can ask him. He can answer. You can ask him directly yourself. He's capable. And I think sometimes people feel like, oh, but I feel like it's really important that you're able to, speak for yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is just people stare in public or people will say things, about an individual or a family or a couple that have disability or mental health that you would never say that to anybody else.
Right.
Yeah, like people will come up and they'll say just the craziest things and you just think like, they must not understand that what they're saying is painful to hear and to be stared at and to be looked at weirdly. Like, we don't need that. Nobody needs that,
Well, living with it on a day-to-day basis, is very complicated.
How so?
I mean, you wake up, you try to be normal as possible
See,
without the sense of having a disability or having stigma associated with it.
so it's almost like you're overcompensating because you know people are already looking at you negatively.
Yes, there's some truth to that statement.
Does it get hard to try to ask for accommodations that you might need, like interpretation or, could you hold the door for me or things like that if you are also trying to pretend that you're normal at the same time?
Yes, it just depends on the circumstances.
Yeah. I think it can help for the individual with disability or mental illness just to be really clear and direct, like, hey, this is what I need, and this is who I am, and this is, what works for me, as compared to just kind of accepting the stigma and going along with it and feeling yucky and feeling awkward.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening to us. We appreciate it. And we'll talk to you more next time.
Bye.
Bye.